Next up, we're going to start to move into our special senses, starting off with vision. Vision is going to be controlled primarily by what organ? Yay, the eyeball, in case you couldn't tell from the diagram. The wall of the eyeball is going to have 3 layers, an outermost layer, a middle layer, and an innermost layer. We're going to go through each one of these layers and give them a little bit more detail and definition. The outermost layer is going to be tough and fibrous. It's going to be made up of 2 parts, known as the sclera and the cornea. The sclera, this is also known as the white of the eye. This is the tough outer part, white of the eye. It's ultimately going to provide shape and protection for the eyeball. It also serves as the site for muscle attachment. This allows you to look left, right, roll your eyes at my wonderful, fabulous sense of humor. All of that is going to come down to the muscles being attached to the sclera. The cornea, though, is going to be a little bit different. Not all of your eye is going to be covered in sclera. So what part of your eye is not covered in that thick, white, membranous tissue? That's right, that's the cornea. The cornea is actually transparent. This is the front part of your eye. This is what allows light to enter and allows us to see. So this is sort of the window of the eye. Light comes in, we look out. That would be the cornea. All of these, or both of these components, make up the white, or make up the outer portion of the eye. The middle layer of the eye is going to be the vascular layer. This is what provides nutrients to the rest of the organ. And this middle layer is going to be composed of 3 specific regions. The choroid. The choroid contains blood vessels that supply chemicals, nutrients, oxygen to the tissues of the eyes. It also contains melanin, which absorbs any light that's reflected from the retina. This gives sort of a dampening effect, and it gives us sharper, clearer focus because we have less light sort of bouncing around inside of our eyeball. Next up is the ciliary body. This is going to be a ring of muscle tissue that encircles the lens. This helps hold the lens in place, and it's also going to adjust its shape. So that's going to be this region right in here, the ciliary body. So what's the purpose of the lens of the eye? Just take a moment and tell me that much. What does the lens do, and why do we care about changing its shape? Finally, we move to the iris. The iris is going to be the muscular part of the choroid layer. It's found just in front of the ciliary body, so that would be, this is the ciliary body, this is the choroid, the iris, this part right here. That's going to be the iris. This is the colored portion of the eye. It's the muscular part of the choroid, and it's going to help regulate pupil size. So it can contain smooth muscle that opens and closes to regulate the amount of light that enters the eye. There is a similar piece of equipment on a compound light microscopes that we use that's going to regulate the amount of light that passes through the specimen. Does anybody remember what that's called on the compound light microscope? The hint, it's also called the iris. It's very hard to do these lectures without a proper, call and response. I need feedback from you guys. But anyway, it's going to be the iris on our compound light microscope as well. And then finally, the pupil is just the opening on the center of the iris. It's the lack of space right here in the iris. The final layer of the eye is going to be the inner layer. The inner layer is going to contain the retina. It contains the photoreceptors that respond to light by generating electrical signals. And they're going to send signals to the brain via the optic nerve. What type of receptors do you suppose they're going to contain? Photoreceptors. Photoreceptors, they're going to contain 2 types of photoreceptors here in the retina. Rods for vision in dim light and black and white vision, and then cones are for color vision. The fovea is going to be a region of the retina with the greatest concentration of cones, and this is where objects are focused here for really sharp, intense vision. There are other structures that are involved in vision, or other structures in the eyeball. For example, there is the lens. The lens is going to be elastic and help change shape. It's transparent, elastic, and roundish in structure. It lies just behind the iris and pupil and is controlled by what muscle? The ciliary muscle controls and changes the shape of the lens. So what would happen to our vision if our lens were to become too cloudy? Oh, here, actually, the function of the lens is to change the shape of the lens by bending of the light. What would happen to our eyes if the lens were to become too cloudy? This is a homeostatic imbalance. This is what is known as a cataract. The number one cause of blindness in the world is cataracts. This is when we get sort of a cloudiness over that clear lens. It can be treated surgically by the removal of the lens and replacement with an artificial lens. So if we remove that lens, replace it with an artificial lens, we can remove the cause of blindness being cataracts, or we can treat cataracts. Here is table 9.1. This is just going to help review the structures of the eye and their function. Spend a little bit of time with this, going over the structures of the eyes and what their roles are. This would be a great source for making flashcards if that is something you like to do as a study aid or a study tool, or you can use the table as a whole for a study tool. There are other homeostatic imbalances, things like focusing problems. These are caused by the inability to completely change your lens shape, or by having a malformed lens. Things like farsightedness, nearsightedness, astigmatism are all caused by discrepancy in the thickness or the curvature of the lens or the shape of the eyeball. Normal vision can be restored with corrective lenses and or LASIK-assisted surgeries. LASIK surgery, laser-assisted surgeries, or LASIK surgeries that can be used to correct the shape of the lens. Here is a table that kind of brings up some of those: nearsightedness, farsightedness, and astigmatism. I recommend spending just a little bit of time reviewing that table, using it either as a tool for making flashcards or as a study aid on its own. And then finally, we'll have just a quick summary video about vision.
The vertebrate eye is similar in structure and function to a camera. At the back of the eye is a thin, light-sensitive sheet called the retina. The eye also has a lens that focuses the light onto the retina. As the eye looks at a point of light, the light passes through the transparent cornea and then through the lens, both of which bend the light, focusing it onto the retina. The retina is made up of a variety of cell types, including the light-sensitive cells called photoreceptors. There are two types of photoreceptor cells in the retina: rods, which are sensitive to dim light, and cones, which are sensitive to color. Each cone cell is most sensitive to one of three primary colors: blue, red, or green. The human retina contains mostly rods, but a region in the center of the retina called the fovea contains a dense concentration of cones. The fovea is the area of highest visual acuity. When people focus on details, such as a point of light, the eye moves to focus the image on the fovea. As light enters the eye, it must pass through several layers of neurons to reach the photosensitive area of the retina. When light activates a photoreceptor cell, the cells that synapse with the photoreceptor are activated, carrying a signal along the optic nerve to visual centers in the brain. Note that the rods and cones lie at the back of the retina, with their light-sensitive regions pointing away from the source of light. Rods and cones have segments that are packed with membrane-rich discs. The membranes of these discs contain large quantities of a transmembrane protein called opsin. Each opsin molecule is associated with a much smaller molecule called retinal. In rod cells, the two-molecule complex is called rhodopsin. Each of the three types of cone, blue, red, or green, has its own specific kind of opsin. The retinal molecule is the light-sensitive portion of the complex. When retinal absorbs light, it changes shape. The change in the shape of retinal causes the surrounding opsin to change shape. The opsin, in turn, triggers a cascade of events that activates the cell. The rods and the three types of cones each have different opsins that determine the wavelengths of light that the retinal will best absorb in these cells. Rods are more light-sensitive than cones and are able to work under low-light conditions. Cones respond mainly to bright light and are responsible for color vision. For example, the type of opsin-retinal complex in the blue cones responds best to blue light. It also responds to yellow light, but less strongly. Intermediate wavelengths cause graded responses. Information from all of the photoreceptors enables the brain to differentiate many hues, using only 3 main types of color photoreceptors.
And that's it for vision as a special sense.